This is Arthur Malman. I'm your host for the GGG Insights. And today we have with us Diana Weir, who has had almost every job around that you could possibly think of. And rather than try to describe her background, I'm going to ask her to describe her background.
Well, I'm a former councilwoman here in the town of East Hampton, proudly served for 4 years. But currently I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development in the town of Southampton.
And let's just stop right there, Diana, because one of the things that intrigued me was reading about this program that Southampton is launching to allow people with houses to build another little building on their property for other people to live in. Can you just describe that better?
Well, it's part of the accessory apartment legislation, which exists now. The town does have an accessory apartment code.
Now, you're talking about Southampton?
Yes, town of Southampton.
Okay, yeah.
They do have an accessory apartment code that allows a separate structure or a dwelling unit on the same parcel if it is set aside, no summer rentals. The building has to be owner occupied, and it has to be basically an affordable price. If it's a family member, they allow that, so there's no issue. You want to build a small apartment, either attached over an existing garage that might be separate, or a little caretaker cottage. All that is already in the code. And now what we're doing is tweaking that code to get more affordability into those units that exist. We have about 500 units, accessory apartments in the town right now.
Oh, do you have any idea how many there are in East Hampton? I mean,
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I really couldn't tell you.
I think it's relatively small. That's
well, when I was on the board, we tried to do an accessory apartment code because people have them. I mean, look, there are people that are renting all over, and they're illegal rentals. I know in the town of Southampton, the last study that they did, and that was the county did a study, was that we needed about 4,000 units of affordable rental or home ownership.
Right.
But that's, you say that and people's eyes want to pop out of their head. You try to do an apartment unit with 12 units or 15 units and it's difficult. The community's opposition is there.
Sure.
But it's been there. So I don't know what the town has done since that as far as accessory apartments.
I think what happens with the GGG, we have debates that we sponsor for council people. That's right, you were there the last one. And one of the questions that always is affordable housing. And everybody at those debates say, we're in favor of affordable housing.
Oh.
And everybody on the town council and everybody in town says we're in favor of affordable housing. It's just not here. Right. Or here, or here, or here, or here.
Or until you tell them it's going to be there. And there are so many myths, and I think a lot of it is fear. I mean, I go to a lot of community groups and people say, well, it's going to change everything. It's going to change my quality of life. It's going to change my property values. It's going to change my school. Because the image is really a false image. What we need here is housing for our own kids that are now moving out.
And for people who can't afford to live in the big house now that the spouse has died.
Every time, exactly. And every time you build a mansion, and we love them. We love our second homeowners because they bring a lot of value to the towns. But by the same token, every time you build a mansion, and I'm not talking about a 500, I'm talking about a mansion, millions, you need caretakers, you need landscapers, you need painters, you need the guy that does the plumbing, you need the woman that does the cleaning. So all those people, they can't live here.
Yeah,
they come from somewhere else, and that's why we have that horrible traffic all summer long when it's the season. It's always bad, the traffic, coming east in the morning, west in the evening. It's the trade parade. And it's called that for a reason. It's the trades. We want them, we need them, but we can't afford to house them.
Well, right now in East Hampton, at least in the village and probably the town, you know better than I do, if I have 2 acres and I build a house, that's the end of the story.
Yep, one dwelling unit.
One dwelling unit. And I mean, it's great. I have 1.5 acres that I can see on woods and all kinds of things. Leftovers, let's call it the leftovers. So we have the leftovers, and there are lots of leftovers scattered all over town that we could do something with. And that's why this program you have in Southampton really caught my eye, because I've had some experience with residential buildings outside of New York City and some inside New York City. And what we found was that when you have affordable units inside something that's market rent, it works pretty well.
It does.
Everybody says it can't work or they don't want to live together. And what you find out is if I'm a developer and instead of a 25,000 square foot building, I could be building a 30,000 square foot building. If I provide 3 affordable units,
whatever, right.
I'll do it in a split second.
Yeah, and that's what we have now. You know, we have an inclusionary zone, inclusionary law from the state, which says that any developer that builds 5 units or more, whether it's single or in a structure or however, has to put 10% in affordable.
Yeah, but we don't have too many of those properties left since the CPF is buying up money. So now we're in a very funny position. We all agree we need affordable housing. The properties that could have been used for affordable housing are basically pretty much off the market. And when one shows its head, 30 people come to the board and scream that they don't want that thing in their neighborhood.
Right.
So as a result, we produce almost no affordable housing in East Hampton, and we have the trade parade clogging the streets.
Exactly.
It's a vicious cycle.
Surprisingly, East Hampton's done a lot more than Southampton.
Really, I'm surprised. I'm shocked.
Yes,
Okay.
don't be shocked. East Hampton, and now that I'm in the town of
Well,
Southampton.
Southampton didn't have you there until just recently.
Well,
now,
I'm trying my
now
best.
now you got the whip. You're gonna beat them.
I'm trying my best, but in East Hampton, we had windmills. We had all the windmills. We had Acabonic. We have the Housing Authority has several that have existed for years in the Acabonic apartments. They are well run. They're well maintained, and the people there are providing services and work for our community and our businesses. So surprisingly enough, East Hampton has done much, much, much more than
But
Southampton.
I've been around here for about 20 years now, but except for St. Michael's, nothing has been built in the last 20 years like that, I don't
they
think.
did build Green Hollow, which
okay.
was single and separate houses.
Okay.
When I was on the board, we started it. We were fought, no, blah, 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 so they never built it. We wanted to put 50 units in.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful, little ranch houses and little, Cape Cod type houses that fit all half-acre lots. Existing zoning was half-acre, so it was perfect. You know, this is exactly what you need. You don't need an affordable house on a piece of property that's going to cost you $1 million. So it was beautiful. And we never got to finish it. I left the board, and then Jay left for the legislature. And about 5 years after, or even a little more, they built 38 units. So they reduced the density, because people always worry about the water quality, the density.
I'm wrong. So we've built 38 units in the last 10
Wow.
years.
Wow. That's what I was
And
going to say.
what's the need? How many thousand? I forgot the number.
I know. So we needed a couple of thousand here also.
Right.
But putting in an accessory apartment, let's say you have an apartment now, but it's not legal, and you want to bring it up to code. That's something that we're trying to do.
Right.
So if it's in a basement, it's going to cost, because you have to put those windows where you can have egress.
Egress,
you need 2 egress. So that makes it difficult. We're working with the Bridgehampton National Bank to get a home equity product that would be a reduced rate product if people are going to legalize. So we're trying to incentivize.
Oh, is the town of Southampton going to guarantee it or something like that?
No. They'll have to have, it's a home equity. They'll have to have equity in the home, the homeowner, and they'll have to be able to qualify,
But why is it a reduced rate? Is that something that
because Bridgehampton is offering it. Now, you have to remember, every bank in the United States has the Community Reinvestment Act that they have to comply with. And that means years ago when they were redlining and giving mortgages only in certain areas, and that was a big scandal and bad thing to do. So now they must reinvest in their community. So they can reinvest.
This kind of thing that you're talking about is pretty risk-free. I mean, I represent banks.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, the
I
chance
was a banker for 29 years,
okay.
So this was a good thing. So I said to them, because the supervisor said, maybe we can lend them. I said, well, the town doesn't want to be a bank. We got enough of those.
Right.
Why don't we talk to a bank and see if in an effort to make them have more CRA points or credits, they can give us a reduced rate. A couple of basis points, maybe 25, 50 basis points would be nice, because now you have a reduced rate. You still can build your apartment from the equity and work it out. So we're trying to do all those creative ways to incentivize people to do that, to bring their apartments up to code.
Until you mentioned it, I've always, in my mind, thought of the apartment over the garage.
There is.
But I just forgot about the fact that there's also the apartment in the basement. And
Yes.
so many people have basements that are used as storage places.
Exactly. But again, and now they're using them as,
Well, movie theaters and bowling alleys.
but I mean, the
you know,
regular people here are
but
using them
I'm-
for apartments.
Yeah,
you know?
but I'm really focused on that now with you for a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
If I have what I'll call a normal basement, no bowling alley, no theater
Right,
for 5,000, no shooting gallery. What you just said is I've got to take the little windows out and put
there's
in
a
big
separate
windows.
window that people can
Yeah,
get out
a large
of.
window.
Exactly.
Okay, it's probably $20,000 or $30,000 to do a couple of those.
I'm
just taking a wild guess. And then I've got to obviously put in a stove and a real
Kitchen,
bathroom.
bathroom, right.
But that's pretty easy, relatively. And the great thing about it is my neighbor can't see it. It's not visually a
It's
mess.
not, you're not making setback problems. If you're building, then you have to do setbacks and the way it looks and the ARB.
And how can the town, building what you're doing in Southampton, how can the town of East Hampton do that? It has to change the rules to allow you to have a second apartment, if you will,
Right.
in your house.
Yes.
It has to,
Comply with all the building
Yeah.
codes and the health and safety codes and fire codes.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you can rent it and have a little income.
what I thought was great about Southampton's program was you also had an income limit on the people who were your tenants.
Yes.
And so what you're really doing is you're providing lower income housing or lower cost housing to
Correct.
people with limited income.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of policing you've got to do to make sure there's really the person there who's living there all year round and
Yes.
so
So
forth.
what we're doing is we're setting up a system through our GIS or a governed system where anyone who gets that apartment, of course, they have to get a rental permit. We have a rental permit process. And then they would have to give me or the housing division a copy of the lease.
I think they'd rather give it to the division. You look like you're pretty tough, so I'd rather give it to the division.
Exactly. Give it to the division. Don't give it to her.
Okay.
But then I would keep a record of those. We want to have a 2-year lease, not just a 1-year lease, because that's, if you have somebody that's happy, you're happy as a landowner. And
Well, but wait, let's stop there for a second. I build one of these apartments, and I'm more than happy to get a 2 or 3 year lease for a person after I get to know them. But I'm terrified that this guy who's great at landscaping or great as a carpenter,
you don't know them.
you don't know him. So I would really want to have the right, say the first 2 or 3 months, to terminate.
I don't know if we would do that. First of all, as a landowner, resident landowner,
Sure.
you do not have to accept anyone. You have the
Right,
choice.
but living with them is different from seeing their resume. And
Oh, no, you don't see a resume. I mean,
I
you
know,
would
but,
interview just like you were a landlord anywhere. I mean, my mother, we owned a brownstone in Manhattan. We had tenants all the time. We had 5 floors right in Midtown. And you rented, the people came in, you talked to them, you sat, you looked, and they took the apartment, they did a lease.
but you weren't living with them.
Yeah, we lived in the building.
Oh, okay.
I lived in the building. I was a Latin from Manhattan. We had a brownstone next to the French hospital. I wish I had it today.
Okay.
It's worth a lot of money. But we lived on the main floor,
okay.
and then there were apartments upstairs. It's
Yeah.
Manhattan. It's brownstone. And I guess some people took those brownstones and made them all for
Sure.
themselves, and
Right.
some people didn't. But I was a kid, so it was like 70 years ago. So things were a little different. But it was fine. I mean, and then you monitor them. So as an absentee landlord, we do not allow for that reason, because
Well, wait a minute. How am I described? I have a house here in East Hampton. I have an apartment in Manhattan.
right,
I use my house in East Hampton all
all
year
the time,
round
year round.
because
right.
I want to interview you
Right,
in the winter.
right.
Okay. Am I a year-round resident or am I an absentee landlord?
You're a year-round resident, but you're not in the home year-round.
Right. I'm in the city on a couple
Right.
of weekdays
So
a year.
we have not addressed that in Southampton. I don't know what East Hampton considers that.
Yeah, because as a practical matter, there are tons of homes here, like mine,
Yes.
where
Oh,
people are
yes.
here all year round on the weekends, pretty much 2 or 3 times a month.
It's their second home.
Second
It's
home.
not
Second homes,
right,
yeah.
exactly.
It's not that I'm renting my house to
Exactly.
somebody.
That we wouldn't allow.
Yeah,
That would not be
okay.
allowed. But we have discussed that, because when you told me about that last week, I asked my boss in planning, the planning division, I said, how would we address that?
Yeah.
Would that be allowed, since it's not another rental? It's a homeowner. They come every weekend. They're not there during the week.
Right, sure.
So we're looking at that now as well, because that was a very good point.
Okay.
And we wanted to make sure that
Yeah, because
something like that could be allowable.
so much of the housing stock is
Right.
used by the people who own the house, but not on an everyday basis.
Right.
I mean, that's what we're talking
And if you have a housekeeper, or a housekeeper and a husband, or a chef that you want to keep there, that's perfect.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
to
that's
have
that's
that.
perfect for
And then
everybody.
you know them and you're comfortable with them.
That's the best possible.
And again, that's the best of both worlds.
And you just kept 2 more people off 27 for the.
Yes, and that really is the goal, because it's not even that. I mean, we're at LTV here today, and we have a small staff. When somebody leaves, it's very difficult to find help who are editors or have some TV experience, or are young
Sure.
people that are if they can't live here.
No.
We have a young girl that travels from Stony Brook. I mean, so it's not just those services, it's everything. It's the nurses, it's the
everything. Yeah.
teachers, it's the
Yeah.
police officers.
I'm involved with the airport. We have a control tower with controllers.
Yes.
The biggest problem, it's a seasonal control tower.
Exactly.
Finding a place for these guys to live. We
I
have a
know.
guy who's making $100 and something thousand a year. His family is someplace else, and he's living in grandma's room.
Yes.
And he's 45 years old.
I know.
He's too old. He's too old for this.
Yeah,
He's
I
not
know.
coming back. He's
But
going to go.
there's just, that's exactly the issue. So you have people from every income strata, because when we say affordable housing, I mean, look, Rennert's house is affordable to
it's-
him.
yeah, right.
Your home is affordable to you,
Yeah.
my home is affordable to
Yeah.
me. So affordable is a very subjective
Sure.
word. And what we're talking about is working people that are making
Yeah.
maybe $100,000 a year and still can't buy a house here.
Right. They can't
Making
afford-
$200,000 a year and kind of still can't find a house here.
Well, this is a point that Manny Villar has made in the recent
Yes,
campaign,
yes.
is that even on the town-wide basis, many of the people who work for the town of East Hampton are not paid enough to qualify to buy a moderately priced
Right.
home in East Hampton.
Well,
I mean, it's just crazy.
I was surprised that in Southampton, about 45% of the workforce comes from out of the area.
They can't afford to live there. That's
Can't
why I
afford
mean,
to live there. And I mean, if you look at affordable areas here, Springs, or some places in Montauk, you're paying $700,000 for a house that's livable.
You know, we're talking a lot about the young working person, but there's another growing area of the community called the older folks. And I know you're 75, I'm 76.
I know, right?
So I want you to show me proper respect, which is like
Exactly.
this.
I
you know.
will, yes, sir.
But what we lack in East Hampton, as we have a larger and larger percentage of our population growing older, is we have no assisted living. We have no independent living. We have just none of those facilities.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, you say, what's going to happen to these people? Even if the guy lives in a modest house and his wife dies, he's not used to taking care of the house himself.
Exactly.
He's got less income because of her pension going away or something like that.
Yeah, so you may want to move into something
You may
like
want to
that.
move into something more modest, maybe one of these rental units we're talking
Right,
about.
right.
Or if you have a little more money, and it's not cheap, to live in assisted living or independent living. But there's nothing here.
There is
There's
nothing
no
here.
plan on it at all.
Well, I don't think we have any property that would be able to accommodate
Well, we have
something
some
like that, even a smaller, because Southampton has changed their code to allow assisted living facilities and with parameters. And when we met, I mean, we had a lot of assisted living facility owners and developers
Yeah.
talk to us.
Sure.
And there is, again, that sweet spot. You
Yeah.
have to have enough units
Sure.
and enough density
Yeah.
to be able to build it efficiently.
You
with,
need about,
you know,
you need about 100 units. And
Yes,
you need
exactly.
about 3 or 4 acres.
Yes.
And you want to be about 3 stories high.
Yes.
And when
So
you
3
mention-
stories here is like,
Well, actually, it's not that hard, because Kathy Burke Gonzalez's mom was in an assisted living facility up Island.
Yeah.
And what they did was very clever. If you look at the assisted
Yeah.
living facility
Right.
from ground level, it's 2 stories. It's a big square, and what you don't see is the courtyard is 1 floor below the ground.
There you
So
go.
there are 3 stories.
Well, that's smart.
It's really clever. It's a clever
Yeah.
way of
And developers will do that if
Oh, yeah.
if they have the incentive and they can make it work. You know,
But
everything
the
is.
the problem we've heard is they also want to get the project done within their lifetime.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to one of them that's building something now up Island about coming here, he said, look, give me 3 acres, I could do this split level deal.
Is that Bristol?
No, it's not, another one.
Oh, okay.
But I don't want to sit there and fight the town.
For 100 years,
For
right.
100 years. I want to be able to come in, make a deposit, and start building within 18 to 24
year
months.
or two, yeah.
Yeah, a year or two.
That's sensible.
And
That's
it doesn't
sensible.
happen unless the town wants it to happen.
Well, that's why Southampton just said, let's set a code, because there was no code that really fit that model.
sure.
So now they have developed an actual assisted facility code, which tells them this is the floors you can build, this is the setbacks, this is
Okay.
what you can have, this is the number of beds we will allow, the parking. So everything is now going to be set in the code, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of parcels that Paul Fiorentino, who was on our
Yes.
show, mentioned. I mean, there's one big vacant parcel pretty much across from Town Hall. And as you get
Oh,
to,
yeah,
as
the
you get-
old, they wanted to put a King Cullen or a Safeway
Something,
in there
yeah,
or something
sure, yeah.
years ago. Yes, yes.
And then there's a lot of 40 or 50 acres toward as you get into Amagansett. And the problem always is the seller wants more than
The cost of the land, yeah.
the
The
cost
cost
of
of
the
the land
land.
is everything out here. And really, the CPF, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
It's supply and demand.
But let me ask you this, which you might know the answer to it, and that is, let's say I'm the town of East Hampton. Do I have the right to buy, possibly with CPF money, or possibly not with CPF money, 4 acres across from Town Hall? And let's say, for argument's sake, it cost me cost the town $10 million. And I'm buying it for assisted living and independent living. And I put that on the market with bids from all the developers.
Right.
But and I find out I'm not going to get really a market rate for 5 acres. Am I allowed to do that?
Not really. So state law, you know,
By the way, I'm going to get a market rate, but not for that expensive land.
Right, so that's the problem, because, again, it's anything that the town does is done with taxpayer funding.
Right.
All the powers of the towns, the villages, the counties come from the state. So there is a state municipal code, and that municipal code doesn't allow you to do certain things, either with your taxes. Let's say you wanted to incentivize whoever and say, we're going to give you lower taxes, different from our tax rate. You kind of can't do that. You can't do favors. You can't give land away. Everything has to be with a request for proposals, which you did say. But we couldn't buy a $10 million piece of property and then sell it to the.
Well, not even sell it, just rent it to the.
Well, then we're in the
For
business
the use,
that
for the
isn't
use.
municipal use if we're
Okay.
going to have it for something. I think the issue came up with the Stephen Hand's Path, the school that closed
Oh,
there.
the CDC, whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the town wanted to either develop it or give it to a not-for-profit to do something. It gets a little wiggy using taxpayer money and act like a developer.
Okay.
There is such a thing as a community development agency that the state allows under its municipal code, which allows you to partner with private sector
Okay.
and use some of those powers to be able to build and then maybe sell to a developer or build jointly and then get paid. So there is some tweaking, but it is through another type of.
Yeah, so I know in
Code.
Yaphank, your area of Brookhaven.
Yes, right.
They're building apartments, they're building a assisted
ABR is
living.
doing a
It's-
marvelous.
But they have a lot of Industrial Development Authority, or
Yes, there's going to be a ton of commercial there.
it's
Yes.
going to be a ton of commercial.
Right.
And it makes a very attractive package for a developer. And it would seem to me, I don't know, but
That's wonderful. That's been many years in the making.
Oh,
Again, even in a town that's a little more receptive, and I think
Right.
it was even in the compatible growth area of the core, the preserved area. So there's all these issues that you have, but the town of Brookhaven was very progressive. But AVR did everything. They bought the land, they're doing the development.
Oh,
All
sure.
they want is for the town to say, yes, you can do it, and here's what you have to do.
Right, but the town has also made it attractive with low
Well,
taxes for a protracted period of time.
Well, yeah,
no
they can
mortgage.
do-
Yeah, they gave them a little package. It wasn't enormous, but it helped
Well,
make
that's
the deal
through
go
the
forward.
Industrial Development Agency in
Yeah,
the town.
right.
So that's what I'm saying. If you want to do that type of creative partnership and working with industry and working with commercial, you have to do it through an IDA.
But I guess that all starts with the fact that the town wants something to happen.
Has to make
If the
it happen.
town doesn't care about whether there's assisted living or independent living,
I know.
it's not going to happen.
Right. And if there's resistance, and that's the sad part about being an elected official sometimes,
Yeah,
that's why.
I see the
it
whip
shouldn't
marks
be-
on your back.
Yeah,
and
I got them all. But I mean, they're so worried about pleasing everyone and sometimes don't want to take a tough stand.
Yeah.
And I know when we built Sagaponic Woods, we had 3 acres in the town of Southampton. Many years ago, we built it when I was with the Housing Partnership.
Ooh.
And
You know what?
What?
Our time is up, and we have to have you come back.
oh my goodness, Arthur,
Diana,
thank you
seriously,
so much. A
just
pleasure. We
terrific.
could have talked for hours.
I know we can. I want to do it again, seriously, because you've got, all kidding aside, you've got a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.